Yeah.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for joining us. And there's a little delay in our broadcast and them chatting, so we'll hang out here as people are getting in and joining the webinar. We have with us tonight Brother Mark Condon of Infinity in Ohio. Hi, Mike Stratton has joined us. What's the name of the city again, Brother Condon?
What's that?
The name of the city that you pastor in?
Gehenna, like banana with a G.
Okay, Gehenna. And so Brother Mark's been pastoring for about 3.5 years. Spent a lot of his life in music. And before that, just as a servant in many areas in the church and serving over the years. So we're very glad to have you today, Brother Mark. If you want to say hi and just do a general greeting to those that are joining us.
Well, welcome everybody that's on, and I'm glad and honored to be here tonight and willing to share whatever I can, and hopefully it'll be of some help.
All right. So as you're joining us, if you can go to the comments on the right-hand side and say hi, tell us your name and where you are from, and that you can hear us and you can see us and everything is working. We appreciate that. Thanks, Sarah, for joining, and Nathan and Michael. All right. So before we do get started, I'd like to say hi to Sarah. Sarah's joining us, Brother Condon. She is AIM missionary to Berlin, Germany.
All right,
and
cool.
Recently he's become a friend of our families because my daughter is going to go on an educational trip. She's 17 to Berlin, Germany this summer for 12 weeks. And as parents, we are very nervous about my daughter going that far away. And so Sarah is going to be flying up here to Minnesota. And Sarah, Brother Condon, you were born here in Minnesota, right?
Actually, I was born in Toledo, Ohio, but I did live 6 years of my life in Minnesota.
Okay, you lived here. Okay. Your dad pastored in Rochester?
Yes, sir.
Right. So you're from Minnesota. Hello, Sarah. So she's coming up here for 3 weeks to be with my daughter and get to know her and stuff. So when she returns to Berlin this summer and my daughter does, they can connect up. Okay, so we'll get started, Brother Condon. So let's dig a little bit back in your past. Tell us about meeting your wife, Carol.
Well, I met my wife, Carol, at Kent Christian College, which was in Dover, Delaware. And of course, it no longer exists. I think after I left, they probably thought, if that's all the better we can do, we might as well close the school down. So, but I did get my wife out of it. She was the secretary of the music department, and I would go in every day to practice, and she would be there at the desk, and she was pretty hot looking. And so I thought, hey, you need to marry me. So that's sort of how all that happened.
All right. So if I understand correctly, and I may have some things twisted here because it's been decades, or a couple of years. When you were first married, you lived in Pana, and that's where you got started in the ministry?
Yeah, I probably was involved before then, but of course, Carol was from Pana, and I moved there to be able to meet her family, be with her family, learn how her family thought, and it gave me insight to how, Carol thought. So we did that, for about 1.5 years prior to really getting married, or maybe a year or so. I wanted to be able to meet her family and get to understand why Carol was the way she was.
Well, there lies the story, right? If I remember correctly, her mother blind dated her dad. He was in the military, and somebody set him up in correspondence.
Yeah, Carol's mom did hair for a lady when she was like 16 years old or 14 years old or something like that. And so the lady asked if she would write her son, who was in World War II and who was over in Vietnam area, or Philippines, excuse me. And so she did, and they dated. They got to sort of liking each other through letters. And through all the letters they wrote over, I don't know how long, a year or so, I guess, he came back and they decided they're going to get married over the letters. They'd never even met. And sure enough, he came back home, came and met her, married her, and the rest is history.
Right. Two very, very awesome people. They spoke a lot into my life, and we greatly appreciated them. So your ministry started in the music area. How did you identify God calling you and building the confidence up? Okay, we just lost Mark. He will be back shortly. He's had a poor internet connection, and so he'll be joining us in a little bit. If you have questions for Mark during the chat, you can post those, and we will share those with Mark as well. And I think I may have mentioned this in our promotions and stuff. I actually grew up in school with Carol Condon, Carol Cox at the time. And her mother was a supervisor at that school. And so their family has fingerprints on my life as well. And we appreciate them. Okay. Nathan from Katy, Texas, thanks for joining us. And thanks for hanging in here as Mark comes back. And he will be back soon. Michael and Sarah, appreciate your patience here. And we'll get back. Kevin Moss, thanks for joining us too. And while we're waiting for Mark, if you have a question for me, I'll take your questions. And Mark, like I said, will be back on. He knows how to get back online. The challenges there with the internet connection that he's having. We apologize for that. All right. While we're waiting in the chat, why don't you tell us about your ministry, where you're at, and what you do in the ministry? I'd like to hear from you. Yeah, it's sorry for the delay in the chat here. I'm sure it's coming through. Appreciate your participating. And while you're doing that, I will phone call Mark, make sure that he understands it. He needs to come back on.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back on. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You come back on?
Yeah, I don't know if it's my internet or what's going on.
That's okay. We're hanging here waiting. That's fine.
Yeah, I think it's my internet, but for some reason it's not.
All right. All right, folks. Appreciate you joining us. If you can comment there, let us know that you're still with us, and questions you might have. Mark is back. Thank you for the content.
Sorry about that, everybody. Obviously our internet is struggling.
We'll pray the devil out of it.
Yeah, really. Your question you were asking me is how do I get into ministry? Did I get that correctly?
Right, you're calling and started in the ministry.
Well, my parents, were pastors, and I grew up around ministry. So I didn't necessarily think that I would be ever full-time in ministry, but I knew I would definitely be involved. As far as full-time, I knew I would be involved in the church and in ministry. But it started, I actually was working a job selling insurance when Carol and I first got married, but I was helping with the music at my parents' church. And I got more and more involved with it. And then the district started asking me to do some camp choirs, and then other districts started to ask. And before you knew it, I was just, getting overwhelmed with a lot of events and things. And so it sort of just, I never set out necessarily to be that way. It just happened, and I got busier and busier and busier until one day that's all I was doing.
All right. So, can you give us a little bit of history behind the Worship iClub and how you got started in that and how that works?
Well, I started the Worship iClub to try to find a way to help churches, especially smaller churches, to be able to have good music. And it's always a challenge in a lot of churches. And I realized the importance of having great worship. And I believe it's a huge key to growth in a church to have great worship. And so we started the iClub to find a way to help people have tracks and sheet music and part helps and also help with, training. We did a lot of webinars and a lot of training through the iClub. And so we, just launched it one day thinking we would help smaller churches. But of course it grew, and we wound up helping all different kinds of churches and universities and Bible colleges all around the world, literally. So it grew to be quite a substantial resource.
Right. And from my perspective, what I've noticed, Brother Condon, is you step out to do something for God because that's what He's calling you to do, not because it's going to be successful or big or grow or whatever. You're just obeying what God calls you to do, and then God surprises you and says, "Oh, by the way, let's open some doors here."
Without a doubt, God seems to have blessed, in a lot of different seasons of our lives. I'm grateful for that. I'm humbled by that. And God had been dealing with me for, probably the last 10 years, maybe a little longer than that now, because we've been going for 3.5 years, but God had been dealing with me for a while about pastoring. To be honest with you, I really struggled with it because I didn't know my own heart, my own agenda. And frankly, I was scared to do it. Because the music in the worship ministry, God had really blessed, and I didn't want to do something that would hurt that, but yet I knew God was calling me. I was confident of that. Now, of course, 3.5 years later, I'm more confident than ever that I'm smack in the middle of what God wants me to do.
Mm-hmm. So for the young person, the young minister, the Bible school graduate starting out today, how would you advise them what to do, A, and B, what kind of expectations to have of themselves and be confident in what they're doing?
Well, first of all, I would say lead where you are, and leadership is really just, it's something that if you're a leader, people will follow, period. I mean, that's probably the quickest and easiest definition of a leader is someone's following you. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. But if you're wanting to get involved in ministry, I would say find a healthy church, which I assume everyone on here has done that, and start by being responsible and doing everything with excellence and go the extra mile. I always tell my children and those that we're working with is, go the extra mile. It's less crowded there. And if you'll do everything you do with excellence, God just keeps opening the doors. If you'll do it with excellence and be submissive to the authorities in your life, God always will honor that.
Right. So you mentioned do it with excellence. Can we drill into that a little bit, right? So if I am going to sing, I just get up to the platform and give it my best and bell it out? Or does do it with excellence have some investment before I get on the platform?
Absolutely an investment before you get on the platform. And excellence to me is not settling for anything just because you were lazy. I mean, every graphic, every song, every production, every message, every chord, whatever it is, if you're leading a children's ministry, for example, years ago when we started out, we were asked to do a children's camp. We didn't just do a children's camp, but we literally thought, how can we make this the most amazing children's camp these children have ever experienced? A camp that they'll remember for the rest of their life. And I mean, we got huge refrigerator boxes and we're shooting bottle rockets and everything else out of them. It was crazy, but we wanted to make an impact. We wanted to influence. And as a result of that, it opened up the doors to, hey, will you do this other camp and then do more camps? And so even though it was children, and it's to some, they would say, well, I don't want to do children's camp. But we did children's camp like it was the most amazing camp ever that was, that we would ever direct. And so we didn't just do it and get a few little songs, but we got the most amazing musicians we could find. Mm-hmm. And we went all out every day, every night, and we poured everything we had into it. And we took it very serious. And, when you give your best in every opportunity that you have, You never know who's taking your measurement for a greater position. So give it your best. Don't ever just get by just because you think it may be a nursing home or children or something that may not be super glamorous. Even though it may be small, do it with everything you've got. Like there's 20,000 people in that facility.
Yeah, that's one area in the Bible colleges that I work with that we always talk about young people. God just wants your availability. And so they don't think they have to have any abilities. Well, what God wants you to make available to him is your abilities. He wants you to educate and practice and grow. He does want your abilities.
Yeah.
But the first step is to be available, but then to develop those abilities. Because if you don't develop those abilities, you're not making yourself available.
I think what's important for everybody to always understand is God has always specialized in taking the inadequate and doing something amazing with it when you surrender it all. And remember the little dude that had the sack lunch, that was totally inadequate. It was not enough, but he gave it all. And Jesus is a master of taking it and multiplying it and feeding far more than you'll ever anticipate. But you've got to learn how to give it all. You can't just say, well, I'm not talented enough. I'm not the best at this. I'm not really good enough. And the enemy is a master of making us think that we're always inadequate. There's somebody that can do it better. And the truth is there is. Mm-hmm. But if you'll give your best and give it all, God will take it and exceed your expectations every time.
Amen. Okay, for those that are joining us in the chat on the right-hand side, feel welcome to share any questions you might have for Mark on church growth or ministry development, music ministry. This is just a meet and greet, sit around and interact socially. So on the chat on the right-hand side, you can ask your questions. So, Brother Condon, let's talk about setbacks. Not giving up, and you've been successful. God has blessed your church, blessed your music ministry and stuff, but I'm pretty sure it always hasn't been a rose garden.
Yeah, there are always setbacks, and in every kind of way. There's setbacks in relations. There's setbacks in finances. There's setbacks sometimes in health. And in fact, I had a heart attack a little over 5 years ago. And that was a massive setback. Everything was going fine. I was actually in Houston speaking at a worship conference when the first heart attack happened. And but it was that crisis or that setback that really set me up for the season I am in now. And I believe that God will always work things out for your good if you'll be faithful and you instead of giving up, throwing your hands up and giving up, throw your hands up and give it to God. And there will be setbacks. Absolutely. And you just got to know that. It's just absolutely unreasonable to think that there's not going to be setbacks. But they're coming, and when they come, you just keep plodding through. And sometimes you just wonder if you'll ever get on the other side of that mountain. But one day you're going to look back and think, not only are we on the other side of it, but God has unbelievably blessed us.
Amen. Amen. We want to speak to that minister that may be discouraged. They're trying their best, pastoring, building a church. They've come up against a wall. Maybe they feel inadequate. And before you answer that question, I just want to share a real quick testimony. I call it the 50-year miracle. My mother came to church in 1964. Her neighbor was inviting her to church repetitively, and Mom kept coming up with excuses. Finally, one day, her neighbor said that they're having a Sunday school contest, and whoever wins that Sunday school contest is going to win a transistor radio, which would be like an iPad or iPhone or something like that today. And so my mother had to go 10 Sundays in order for this lady to get enough points to win. And so she went to church for 10 Sundays, and she ended up being impressed with the biblical truth and the plan of salvation, and the pastor baptized her. At the time, my parents came across some hardship and had to move, so they moved about 2 hours north to Marora. Well, fast forward 50 years. In 2014, My mother had been in the church for 50 years, blessed our family, raised all my brothers and sisters, my grandchildren, or her grandchildren, my children, and my nieces and nephews. Just a huge blessing to us as a family, raising us in the truth. And so we want to celebrate that 50 years. So I started talking around and networking and stuff, trying to figure out who that pastor may have been in Belleville, Illinois in 1964. What come to find out was a minister by the name of Brother Donald Knight. And Brother Donald Knight was still alive. So I was given his phone number, and I called up Brother Donald Knight, and I said, Brother Knight, you don't know me. I'm Hugh Plappert, but 50 years ago, you pastored in Belleville, Illinois, and you baptized a red-headed lady. Do you remember that? He says, Brother Plappert, you have no idea what you just said. I was in Belleville, Illinois for 9 months. It was a family-run church, and we were butting heads. We were getting nowhere. So I had the Sunday school contest, and only one person came from the Sunday school contest. That's why her neighbor won the transistor radio. He only baptized one person during that 9 months. She attended church for a couple months and then disappeared. He wrote her off, thought nothing of it. But the devil kept telling him how much of a failure he was. And for 11 months, he didn't know if he was going to be in the ministry or not. Eventually, he went to Mississippi and pastored for 5 years, then went to Stone Mountain, Georgia, and built that work up from a church plant. Stone Mountain, Georgia is the first church in the United Pentecostal Church to be able to sponsor every missionary through PIMs. He has preached in 158 countries, I believe, in all the states of the United States. But the devil kept reminding him of his failure in Belleville, Illinois. The devil kept reminding him, but Belleville. Every time the word Belleville came up, it was a black spot in his past until he got that phone call from me. And as you know, Brother Condon, my older brother's a missionary to Cuba. My mother was involved in the camps and touched many lives. I'm here at the Bible school, work at headquarters, all from that mistake. So stick in there, ministers. It may be 50 years, hopefully not that much. If you could share a word of encouragement, Brother Mark.
You know, I just actually had lunch with my parents, and when they were in Rochester, Minnesota, they baptized Spanish. They did a little 15-minute TV program. It was 15 minutes, and I think they sang a couple songs and gave a little tiny, quick, message. Obviously, all in 15 minutes. And so there was a lady there. She was Spanish and hardly spoke English. She was from Mexico, and I don't remember where, but they heard this broadcast. They came in the Rochester church, wound up, getting saved and going back to Mexico. And over 800 people have been filled with the Holy Ghost as a result of this lady, family members and friends, all of this family. So, you never know, what one person that comes in, like you just shared, you just never know the power of one person and how they can impact over the long haul of life, and so yeah, you just keep plowing. And sometimes, man, we've pastored now for a little over 3.5 years. I joke around. I said, I've never felt more bipolar. I mean, 1 minute I'm like just unbelievably pumped, and the next minute I'm like so down, and you feel so emotional, and you have all these swings, and you think, oh, it's not going to make it. And the next thing you think, hey, we are going to make it. And but you just keep plugging, and just keep going at it, and God gives the increase. Amen.
I think part of the formula is God doesn't want any one of us to take 100% credit for bringing somebody to Christ.
Right.
He wants it to be shared among people over time. So that pastor that is struggling and looking for a growth opportunity, can't think of a way to break into his community. Could you maybe share him some creative ideas, resources, suggestions?
Yeah, I would love to share at least what we do. I don't, I mean, every church is different. Every church has its own culture and personality. But one of the things in all my years of traveling, one of the things I really discovered is most churches have a great defense plan, meaning they have great church but they don't have a really strong offensive plan, meaning They don't have something they do every week, every month, quarter, every year to reach new people. And to me, I never really understood that. And so when we planted Infinite Church, that was the one thing I thought, I want a strong, consistent, something we do every week, every month, every quarter, every year, that we keep reaching people. Because if we don't reach people, then, we're not going to grow, obviously. And as long as heaven and hell is a reality, we must grow. So one thing I would say is, what is your plan for growth? What do you do every week? Is it everybody checking in on social media? Is it door hangers? Is it, people sharing their story? And how do you encourage people to share your story? We all know your church will be what you preach. And for us, when we started Infinite Church, we built this church on two great things. Whatever was great to God, we said it will be great to us. So you have the great commandment, which is love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. And whatever you love, you'll worship. And so we said, we will be a worshiping church. We will be a church that loves God. And then the other thing that's great is the Great Commission. And that is to go out and share Jesus with somebody. And I'm convinced if you get the first one right, the second one comes pretty natural and pretty easy. The more we love God, the more we're going to talk about him and share him with people. So it's got to be something that you constantly are, drilling. So we have one push Sunday every month. This is not a Sunday that we're necessarily trying to break some attendance record, but it's something that we do to help spur an extra effort of getting people there. And then we do about 4 major Sundays those are Sundays that we really do go for, attendance, to break our record attendance. And what we're trying to do in those events is create a catalyst for people to get that in their heart. When you realize that almost 80% of unchurched people that you ask to come to church with you or to a life group or a Bible study with you, over 80% of the people will come if you ask them. Why we don't ask is beyond me, I guess, because we focus on the 20% and we think they're not going to come. But you've got to find a plan for your church that you are constantly letting it know. For one of the things we do are social media check-ins. And we ask everybody, when you come here on Sunday, if you are on Facebook, on social media, check in. Let every one of your friends know that you are in church on Sunday morning. And each one of them are connected with probably at least a minimum of 300 friends. Yeah, I said, you don't have to say a lot about it, but when all those people see you checking in every week, it's making an impact. It's sowing a seed. I walked into the bank the other day to do some business for the church and talked to one of the bankers there. And we were working on something. And I said, I'm Pastor Mark from Infinite Church. She goes, oh, I've got a friend that goes there. I said, really? And I said, what's her name? So she told me her name. And I said, absolutely. I said, well, man, what's taking you so long to get there? She said, I see her check in every Sunday.
Wow.
On social media. And so we have so many people in our church today that have come because of social media, and it's free. And it's free. And so what we do is we tell all of our people, for every person who checks in, we will donate 50 cents to Grin, which is a Gahanna Residents in Need, and it serves the needy in our community. So they know when they check in, not only does it share it with their friends, but they also know that we are helping the community and those that are struggling and those that are hurting. That's one way. We just ordered another 2,500 door hangers. People ask me, are door hangers that successful? The truth is, no, they're really not the most successful. But I'm also convinced to do nothing isn't successful either. So I would rather do something. At least God knows we are trying our best to reach our community. I was at a luncheon today with some businessmen and ministers, and one of the pastors there said, we get your door hangers all the time on our door. So I think you've got to be aggressive. And, you know, you already know that there's going to be some attrition. They say that 6% of your church leaves every year due to, you know, move-aways. You know, some people get offended or whatever. They just leave, but, you know, or die. You know, I mean, so 6% of the church, there's 6% attrition. If you're not growing, you're shrinking. You know, so we've got to have some kind of a consistent plan, what you keep doing all the time, not just one time, but what you keep doing all the time.
Amen. Yeah, I can testify to that check-in. I do a ton of studying and research on church growth across all kinds of denominations. And I know of one church that actually cut out their marketing budget totally and built their church on check-ins. It's that powerful.
Yeah.
When your friends see that you are proud to go to church. And what he does at the check-in is don't just check in, but tell them why you're coming to church.
Yeah.
And it took off, and he grew a significant sized church just from those check-ins. So that's
we have people that, you know, they'll put lyrics to a song, they'll put maybe a piece of the message, or they'll just say, I love my church, or today was amazing, you know. And every Sunday, I love to just go through and read all the check-ins of what people are saying. In fact, we had one lady said, I never really was into social media till I came to Infinite. And she said, one of my favorite parts of the week are on Sunday afternoon, going through all the check-ins and seeing what people said. And then what's always rewarding is you see friends of people. Do you go to this church? You know, where's this church located? And, you know, and you see, well, man, I definitely want to come and check it out. And so, you know, we've been going for over 3.5 years. There's not been one Sunday from the day we planted that we've not had first-time guests. So they say if you have less than 5% of your congregation, you should have at least 5% of your congregation should be first-time guests every Sunday. If it's not, then you are not doing a good job evangelizing your community.
So, Brother Paul pastored in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and had a major failure. And so he writes articles and teaches today on things to not do when planting a church. And one of his major failures was if you showed up 2 Sundays in a row, he wanted to know how come you weren't paying tithes. So the visitors come, and when they come now, you've got a very delicate and precious and wonderful opportunity to speak into their lives. So how do you take that visitor and kind of ingrain them, not offend them, but, you know, preach the truth, and eventually, you know, they want to be baptized and become part of the church instead of trying to dunk them the first Sunday?
Great question. And the quick, simple answer, and then I'll give you a little, you know, some of what we do. But the quick answer is we must connect before we correct. And we've got to build a trust with people. And we tell our whole church, all of our volunteers, we have one thing that what we consider is a win every Sunday. And I think that's what everybody needs to determine. What is a win for your church? And somebody, well, if someone gets is filled with the Holy Ghost, or if someone is baptized, you know, those are wins. And yes, they definitely are. But we have narrowed it down for our church that the win for everything we do on Sunday is for this win, and that is that they come back the next Sunday. That's the win for us. Because if they get baptized today and they don't ever come back, that certainly wasn't a win. If it's all done on emotion, that wasn't a win. So the win for us, we tell all of our volunteers when they go and scatter to all their places, we tell them, everybody, your win is to do your job so well that people will say, I want to come back next Sunday. When they come back next Sunday and they do that over and over and over, you know, you begin to develop a relationship with them and they begin to trust you. It's not been our method to try to, you know, see how quick we can get them into the altar, you know, or get them baptized or something. That's not, we just didn't go about it that way. Certainly it is what we're shooting for. And certainly, you know, their salvation is the goal. But we do a few different things. One thing we do is we do what we call Stick Six. And we do this at the end of every service. And we say, we have something here, we'd like to issue our Stick Six challenge. And that challenge is this: we don't expect you to, come one Sunday and make this your home church. It's hard to make that kind of a big decision on one Sunday. But what we ask you to do is stick around for 6 Sundays. We think at the end of 6 weeks, if you're really looking for a home church for your family, we feel like at the end of 6 weeks, you'll be able to tell whether Infinite Church is a place where you can, grow and is a safe place for your family. We have what we call a funnel, and first-time guests fill out a Connect card, and I will send them a thank you note. We send them an email, and then on the first Sunday of every month, we host a pastor's breakfast. And that is where I go in. We sit down with all the guests from the previous month, and I sit down and talk with them, share with them the vision of Infinite Church, and make some connections. We have some people there that also are connecting and trying to create relationships. We tell people all the time at Infinite Church, this church will grow at the speed of relationships. And so then we take them from that pastor's breakfast into what we call Infinite 101. That's 4 weeks, and that's just 4 weeks of some simple foundational training. It's not deep, it's pretty shallow, but we're trying to get them to learn how to be faithful and consistent. If we can get them to be faithful and consistent, the rest of the stuff will all come, as time goes on. But we've got some people that have been around, they'll be around for a year and a half, and you're thinking they're not making any move, you're thinking they're not getting it. And then all of a sudden they'll walk up to you one day and say, hey, we want to be part of the next baptismal service. And we're a load-in church, so we don't have a baptismal tank there all the time. So about every 8 weeks, we corral them all. Now, we can baptize someone if they need baptized right then and there. We can't do it right then and there, but we can take them to our offices and baptize them there. But typically, we're training them and teaching them and talking about baptism, which I sort of like because it's not such a spontaneous, emotional decision, but they've really thought about this. They know what they're getting into. So that sort of has been our operation of trying to take new people. We're very, very patient, and we're not invasive, and we're not trying to prove some point with them. They can come as long as they want, and we'll just keep loving on them. But if they don't trust us, that decision's not going to be that deep anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, the relationship building is so important. I knew one church that they were really rattling around Bible studies until the pastor got word that the visitors were getting hit with 20 requests for Bible studies. You came that first Sunday, 20 people would come by and ask you for a Bible study. So he could discontinue Bible studies in his church. Brother Carlton Kuhn, who has some discipleship curriculum that he sells at carltonkuhnsenior.com. That first series of lessons, he said he used to do a lot on doctrine, but he has cut that out. And his first series of lessons are on the Christian basics of Bible and prayer and church faithfulness and establishing them. And then once they're established, then you can go down and talk about right. Doctrine instead of saying, here's 10 reasons you might want to leave our church, Yeah. That you mentioned families, and families are really key, right? If a family can see a church meeting their needs, then that's where they want to belong. And a lot of times we don't want to talk about families and their needs. We want to talk about our organization, our history, who we are, and doctrine. What are some of those family needs that a church can address, and how can they do that?
Well, I first of all, almost every family in the church, out of the church, is broken and has dysfunction in it. Sad to say, even Christian families, have a lot of brokenness in their homes and a lot of wounds. And so we spend a lot of time preaching hope and healing for people and trying to let them know there is hope. And when you walk with God over a period of time, that pain concealed is pain that will go unhealed. But when we open it up to Jesus, that he can heal that. And so we spend a lot of time in those needs. Certainly you have some that are financial needs, but those aren't the most hurtful needs. The most hurtful needs are broken marriages, abuse, and a lot of it is a lot of, emotional healing. So we spend a lot of time. We don't do a midweek Bible service because, again, we don't have a building. So we do life groups, and we spend a lot of time discipling and loving and building relationships with people in those life groups.
Okay. We have a question from Jeff. Have you reached out to the city leaders, and how?
Yes, actually. We've had the mayor at our church just a couple of weeks ago. We've had the chief of police at our church. He was also there in January. We've had the person that's the head of GRIN, which was Gahanna Residents in Need. I just invited this week. I stopped in and saw our principal of the school that we meet at and asked him if he would be willing to come. So believe it or not, it's not that hard. The biggest thing to do is ask. If you ask, you'll find out that most of them are willing to come. So what I did is I reached out to our mayor and said, listen, we're 3.5 years old. We've got several hundred people here that are in this community and that attend Infinite Church. And we are wanting to be a very strong community church. And I want them to have the heartbeat of this city. Would you be willing to come and just speak for 5 minutes on what you feel like we could do as a church to bless this community? So it was sort of a multiple thing with me. I wanted him to come and experience Infinite Church, but I also, wanted Infinite Church to experience him and his leadership. And so we've done that we did the same thing with the police, chief of police, and he came, and I literally just emailed them and asked them if they would be willing to come. And very quickly shot back and said we would be honored to come. And they were excited to come. And everyone that's come, they just sit there with this massive grin on their face like, this is amazing. He said, they get up and say, this is quite a movement, that you have going on. We are so thankful. The city shares our stuff on social media. Like we do a 50,000 Easter egg hunt coming up here on March 31st. Last year, the city shared our social media promotions on the city Facebook page. And they follow us on Instagram and Twitter and social media. And we're very, like today, I spent time sitting down with our district school district superintendent and some of the other pastors and the mayor. So I go where they are. I take time and go sit down with them. If you'll do that in your community, it'll pay amazing dividends.
Okay. So the next question from Nathaniel, can you talk more about life groups, how you organize those, the goals and how they work?
Okay, great question. As I traveled around for years, I saw some churches that were doing life groups, some that weren't, some that were trying to do them, and a midweek service. A lot of pastors aren't willing to give up their midweek service for life groups, and I get that. And I think each church has to do what they feel like works for their culture. When we started this church, again, we don't have a permanent location, so it was an obvious way for us. And I probably will never have, I usually don't say never, but I don't see myself ever having a midweek service. We are huge into life groups, and about half of our church is in life groups sometime throughout the week. Like I had one at 7 this morning with a bunch of men at a restaurant. We do it every Tuesday, or they do it every Tuesday morning. I just happened to go this morning to that particular one, but we have them all over Columbus, Ohio area. And most of them are on Wednesday nights. And most of them are every week, but we have some that are short-term life groups. They may be like Marriage Mondays, and we may do it 4 Monday nights. We may do something on raising children, and that may be 4 nights. We'll do maybe a Financial Peace University, and we consider that a life group. To me, a life group is a place where there's fellowship, where there's word, and there's worship. And so and there's prayer. And so they're doing life together. They're usually anywhere from 15, anywhere from 8 to 15. We have a couple of life groups that are just packed, and there'll be 25 people in a house, but I tell you, the relationships that go on and are built in life groups are extraordinarily powerful. And people, I mean, it's funny, we did a wedding shower a couple of weeks ago, and all these people came, and they didn't realize they did it, but they sat in their life groups with the people that they talk with every week and communicate with, and they sit in their groups because they've become, such good friends. And so it's a great way for new people to come in and lock in and create relationships.
Okay. So this is quite a lengthy question from Sandy. I'd love to hear about the topics of delegation as a church planter. It is sometimes difficult to turn things over to others. They may seem enthusiastic enough, capable even. What if then, once they are given a role, they do not follow through? What if they are inconsistent? What if they are not as passionate about the role as you might have been? What if they are not as proficient in it as you expected them to be? In church planting, it isn't like there's a line of other people waiting to pass the role off to if that one person drops the ball. It is often very tempting to take the ball back. We can coach, train, equip with ideals, but if the person doesn't respond or fulfill the role, then what? It would be awkward to fire a volunteer. People can be sensitive about their titles, whether they care about carrying out the duties of that title or not. What are we missing? It seems easier to do it yourself than to go through the process of training and watching someone be dropped because you passed it off.
All right, a really good question. I understand all of that, and I got a few things I'll say. Number one, your church will never grow until you delegate. And we must delegate. We must empower. We must develop people. And so one of the things, hang on, I got people coming in. One of the things that we really, let me start here. When you've got to get people involved. So you get people involved in low areas that are not super, they don't really control your church. But for example, we create places for new people to get involved, and they may be holding a sign on the road. They may be help setting up in the morning. We get there at 7 o'clock every Sunday morning and set up. And so you find those people that are really responsible. They show up every week, and you start to promote the ones that can handle little things well. And as they begin to develop in that area, then you start handing them responsibility. Now, you're going to have people fail. That's part of it. But you've got to give them a chance to fail. The only way to trust people is to trust people. You gotta, and you trust them with the small, and then they keep growing. But I think one of the things that really limits churches from growing is people try to own positions, and pastors don't trust, or leaders don't trust. And if we don't empower people and let people have a chance, then we'll never know. There'll be some people that will fail you, but there will be some people that will blow your minds at how good they do what they do. And yeah, there'll be times you may have to take it back, and you'll just have to learn how to be discreet about that. And then we tell our volunteers, listen, if you get into a place that you don't enjoy, please don't keep doing it. Let us know, because if you don't enjoy it, chances are they'll quit coming because they don't want to do it anymore, and they don't know how to tell anybody. So if they're not doing well, it's important to sit down and tell them, let them shadow somebody before you give them all the responsibility. Let them shadow someone who's already doing it. If you're doing it, let them shadow you. If you're running the multimedia, let them see you do it. And then, in a rehearsal, let them run it. Let them practice in a rehearsal. Then let them work with you maybe in the altar service or something, that's a little less important as far as it being perfect. And but then eventually hand it over to them. again, you've got to trust people. Yes, you'll have to take people out. It's important that you get the right people in place. And it's also important that you delegate. If you try to control it all and micromanage it all, it will kill you.
Okay. Related question coming in from Joe. How crucial is the investment and mentoring of our youth?
Let me go back that last question one more thing and say one more thing too. For every statistics say, for every person you have actively volunteering, your church will grow by one person. So it's important that we get more volunteers, because the more volunteers we get and that are working, the more the church grows. And there's some reasoning behind all that I won't go into right now, but it's vital. It's vital that you get people volunteering and you create that culture in your church. What was that question again?
How crucial is it to invest and mentor our youth?
Well, our church is, pretty young. We have a lot of millennials in our church and a lot of students, really, in our church. Them plugged in everywhere. We're developing them, and our colors, our graphics, our style of the way we do church, everything we do is geared strategically for the millennials, the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings. Not that we're not reaching for everybody. We are, and we have a lot of older people that come to our church. But the reason we do that, because we believe in that younger generation, and we believe in 10 years, we're going to have an army of talented people that can help Infinite Church become what we feel like God wants it to become. So our worship leaders, this may sound bad, but most of our singers, our average age on our platform is probably around 28 years old. And we purposely do that. And we have tons of students that come. We've got about 20 people that show up at 7 o'clock on Sunday mornings to help set up. And I would say the majority of those are late teens and 20-somethings. There are a couple that are older, but they're mostly in their 20s. And they're shapeable, they're eager, they're hungry, and they don't want to just come to a church and sit. They want to do something, and they want to be involved. So they want to be the church. They don't want to just sit around.
All right. This is going real well. I got a bad echo. Somewhere.
From me?
It might be. Okay. Anyway. Do bring your church growth questions up. We're going to wind it down a little bit. The current question. Can you tell us about your experience when you first went to the city that you pastored, where you were holding the service, and what was your first outreach?
We planned 9 months before we held our first service. We did 3 what we called info meetings or information meetings. We handed out door hangers, and a couple churches helped us. And we had about 80 students from all the other churches that, are within driving distance. Quite a few churches helped us do that. We passed out about 5,000 door hangers and we did a big, we did this, I can't remember the name of it, some book of coupons that's mailed out to everybody, reached 30,000 people. But we did 3 info meetings in the beginning, and we met in a little convention center where they do a lot of weddings and business meetings, right smack in the middle of Gehenna in an area called Creekside, which is everybody knows where it's at. So we met there. We didn't have church. It was 1 hour long, and we just shared our vision. We're coming to town. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to be. And we had hors d'oeuvres, and we ended with 1 or 2 songs, and it was quick. And our purpose of that is to share what we were doing. We had about 50 some people that showed up at each one of those. And each time we got people that we had a core team of about 15 of us, 8 being my family. My one son was married, so there's 6 in our family. And there's 7 actually. There's 8 now, but at that time, 7. And then we had another 8 people that planted with us. We had a strong team. So we did 3 info meetings. I'm giving such a fast version of this. And then we did a few pre-launch services in the summertime. And that was basically, for lack of a better word, practice. We did service. We wanted to see if we had, after all the planning, we wanted to make sure how smooth our services were. We didn't want them jakey. We didn't want them looking like, before everybody. We invited everybody. We wanted to make sure we worked out all the kinks. And then, and I'm not saying this is how everybody needs to plant their church. This is just how we did it. And then all those students I was talking about, those 80-some students from other churches helped us. And we had, about this time, we had built up our, what we called a launch team of about 25 to 30 pretty stable, solid people. And so we passed out hangers, we Facebook marketed, we did everything we could. And we had 172 people on our very first service. Now, the next week we had about half that. And that's about where we landed. A lot of those people that first week were friends and families and people who were just celebrating with us. And so we wound up with about 80 people off the get-go, 70 to 80 people. And we grew from there. And that was pretty much how we got started. Did I answer that question appropriately?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you for that. Wow. I'm getting a real bad echo. So we had some questions about your music, appreciation for your music, and one person wanted to know the best place to find your CDs.
Well, they can go to markcondon.com, or they can go to iTunes and download it if they want to download the music. They can listen to it on Spotify if they want to do it that way. So those are 3 quick areas. Or they can connect to our church app, Infinite Church app. And our new music from the church is released, you can get it from there. There's free charts on there on the app, at Infinite Church app. But you all can connect on our Facebook page too, our Infinite Church Facebook page, and follow our journey of what we're doing at Infinite Church. I'm actually going in the studio. We've been in the studio, and I'm working on releasing a brand new song here shortly. So I'll be in the studio on the 20th of this month recording vocals. So and releasing a brand new song.
All right. Questions come in. Currently, where are you holding services?
We are in our 3rd location, and we are in a middle school auditorium and a couple rooms next to that auditorium that we do our children's ministry in. The auditorium now seats 600 people, so we have a little room to grow.
Well, thank you, Brother Condon, for visiting with us tonight. Any closing words?
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you for letting me come.
All right. Thank you for your questions. For all those that participated. This will be on our YouTube channel under Finish Line Planner. So let people know that this is available. Everybody, have a good evening. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.